Morning, Nana. You're in the right place. I'm just getting set up. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. Morning, Esther. We're just getting set up and then we'll get started. We'll be about 1 minute and then we'll get going. Hello to those of you that are just joining us. We're going to get started in 1 minute. Just some of the other sessions that finished at 12 are just finishing up. So 1 more minute and we'll get started. Okay, I was saying morning, but I've just realised we have turned to 6 minutes past 12, so good afternoon is probably a better statement. Good afternoon for those of you who don't know me. I am Mrs. Peskett. I am an assistant head teacher at Shenley Brook End School. I also teach psychology, and psychology is my passion. I've been at Shenley quite a long time. I won't say how long because you'll just realise how old I am. But the idea behind today is that we start to have a look at what psychology might be like at A-level, although we're online, and we start to have a think about some of the key questions. So I can see that the chat is already working for some of us. Welcome to those of you that are just joining. Some of you will have lots of knowledge of this, and some of you will have less knowledge. Just to be clear, to study A-level psychology, you don't have to have done GCSE psychology. So the first kind of month, we very much have a mix. We're very much used to teaching a mix of people that have done it before or not. And then by around about October, we're all on the same page anyway. So my starting question for you this morning, please, and if you would like to put your answer in the chat box, what is psychology? If somebody asks you to define or explain what psychology is, what might you put? Answers in the chat box, please. Brilliant. We have got our first contribution. Thank you. It's always a bit of a wait time, isn't it? Because I know it takes a little bit of time to have a think, but that's fine. So the study of individuals' mental state and habits, yes. The scientific study of the mind. Yeah, that's a really good question as well as an answer. Absolutely right, Layla. Some people say psychology is a science. Some people are less convinced because it's more of a new science. But yeah, it's definitely an ology, if you like. Study of the mind and understanding how people's minds work. Beautiful. None of those answers are incorrect. It is to do with the mind, but it is also to do with our brain and with the behavior that happens as a result of our brain. So when we are looking at psychology, like I said, ology, like biology, psychology, sociology, ology is actually the Latin for study of. So psychology is quite simply the study of the psyche, and the psyche is an old word for mind. It's both an applied and academic field. What I mean by that is there's loads of research and loads of academic study, but there is also lots of practical applications. So there are psychologists in real life who treat people based on this information. And at A level, there's hopefully a really nice mix of looking at some of the research and then the application. So what does that look like in real life? What does counselling look like? How might you treat schizophrenia, for example? So we are looking at how we think, how we act, and how we feel. And it's really important in psychology that we are what we call evaluative, and we'll spend a bit of time on this later. But basically, there's no one theory in psychology. There's lots of different explanations as to why people might behave in a certain way. Okay, so just a little bit of a brief overview in case you haven't seen it in the prospectus, or you're still thinking about which subjects to pick. If you are definitely doing psychology, we do ask you to get the textbook, but we don't expect you to arrive with that on the first day. So it might be that you just keep that in mind for something that you would need near the start of the time. The PowerPoint that I'm sharing with you today is actually in the team in the files section. So if you want to use this to help you later on, then you can do. But basically, what will we be studying? So in psychology, at the very end of the A level, which sounds strange to be talking when we're right at the beginning, but at the very end of year 13, the way that you are assessed is through 3 exams. So we talk about that so that people know straight away there's no coursework or controlled assessment. It is all done through exams. So that might be something you want to consider and whether that suits you. But we look at lots of different topics. So we look at social influence, which we're going to have a little bit of a look at today, all about why we behave the way we do and how we are impacted on by other people. We look at memory and attachment, and we also look at psychopathology, so things like treatments of phobias and abnormality. There's quite a bit of biopsych in this, so there's a little bit more science, if you like, as you'd probably expect in A-level psychology than there is at GCSE. You'll be looking at things like the central nervous system, the limbic system, all those biological terms around the brain and our behaviour. And then in year 3, we do some of our topics. We do gender, looking at gender identity and whether males and females are different, and if they are, why? Is it upbringing? Is it biology? What might it be? We look at schizophrenia, and we also look at aggression, which is a really interesting one. So why is it that people that might be perfectly normal at work and can control their anger might go to a football match and get involved in hooliganism because of the group dynamic? Although we had a very happy, didn't we, sports situation yesterday, maybe, rather than an angry one. But there's some of the things that we might be looking at as we go through our 2-year course. So let's jump into a bit of psychology. Okay, so that first topic is called social influence. Just before you've read the slide, no key terms, just your general observations. Why do you think it is? And we all know it, and we've all probably done it, or we know people that have done it. Why is it that you think people behave differently when they are around others or when they are around certain groups of people? If you want to pop the answer in the chat. Why is it people act differently or behave differently around certain people or certain groups of people? Okay, brilliant. Some answers coming through. Yeah, so they might like or dislike certain people. Yeah, so that can definitely affect your behaviour. If you've got people you dislike, you're more likely to be closed off. Yeah, adapting your behaviour to fit in. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We have this thing, don't we, that if you change your behaviour to fit in, you're being a bit of a sheep, okay? That you're just going along with the crowd. However, if you weren't to fit in with the crowd at something like a one-way system at a school, or a way of behaving at a funeral, then that would be crazy. Like if we were all acting in different ways, it wouldn't work. So it's not always a bad thing, and we have to get that in our mindset, because sometimes we just think, oh, it's not great to change our behaviour, but sometimes it's appropriate. I'm sure lots of you behave differently at home to what you do in school. Okay, you might swear when you're around certain people, not when you're around others, and that's just about being polite and respectful. Although I'm sure none of us swear ever at all. So yeah, just this idea that people might want to fit in. That's a really good contribution, Zach. Yeah, this idea that we might want to fit in with a crowd and be a bit anonymous. So football hooliganism is certainly an example of that. But another example would be like riots and mob mentality, when people get caught up and people who would never normally break the law are setting fire to things. That would be definitely an extreme example, but it would be an example all the same. Brilliant. So what have we got on this slide here? We have got this idea that we conform, okay? So conformity is kind of the first key term that you come across in year 12. And we say that conformity is a type of social influence. So there's lots of different types of social influence. And it's a very light level of social influence, okay? It's not really in-depth and serious. But it's basically when we change our behaviour, like we've said, to fit in with a group of people. And you've got some scenarios there. I'm not going to ask you to say whether you have or not, but I'm sure all of you will look at those scenarios and think, there are times where I have done stuff to fit in. Okie doke. So there are two types of conformity, and I'm going to do a little bit of a quiz to see if our understanding is there. Just before I do, they may feel more comfortable around certain people. That's a great explanation. Yeah, the level of being comfortable. Okay, brilliant. Brilliant. Esther, yours are showing now, my lovely. Maybe there's a bit of a delay, but we are all good. Okay. So if we have got two types of conformity, those two types are on the screen now, and those two types are normative social influence and informational social influence. So to be clear, normative social influence is the desire to be liked, okay? So when we have normative social influence, we are looking at conforming because we want people to like us, okay? We want to fit in, we don't want to appear foolish. Informational social influence is when we do things because we have the desire to be right. Okay, so it's not about fitting in, it's about, I'm not sure of a situation, so I need to make sure I do what everyone else is doing so I fit in. Okay, so just going to put another slide up for you to check your understanding. So which is which? My first question is, that first grey box, do you think that is normative or informational social influence? And remember, normative is to be liked and informational is to get it right. So the top box, is that normative or is that informational? Perfect, perfect, perfect. So lots of you going with normative. Brilliant. Okay, so yeah, that would mean that bottom one is informational. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this slide back up so you've got the definitions, and I'm going to tell you some brief stories. Okay, so I'm going to read out a scenario, and when I've finished, I want you to write in the chat box whether it's normative or informational. Okay, so you've got the definitions there while I'm doing it. Don't type, you can type it in, but don't send it until I ask you to. Okay, so It is Jim's first day of college, but Jim has arrived late and missed the part where the lecturer told all the new students what they should be doing during induction. He sees a group of students filing off towards a corridor and decides to follow them. So Jim's arrived, he's late, he missed the bit where they tell him what to do. Students start walking off, filing towards a certain place, and he just follows them. So type in the chat box, do you think that is normative or informational social influence? What's Jim going through? Brilliant. Well done, you two. Well done. Well done, Esther. Well done, Layla. Yeah, and the reason being, he wants to get it right, doesn't it? He's not following them because he wants them to like him. We don't know. It doesn't say anything about that in the story. It's all about the fact he was late and he's doing it because he wants to get it right. Okay, so you're exactly right, both of you. Well done. And informational is when we're not quite sure what's going on. Okay, so Sam has just started. This is your second story. Sam has just started to work in an office. On his second day there, his colleagues had a discussion about asylum seekers coming to the UK. His colleagues thought that they received favourable treatment from the government and that this should stop. Sam doesn't agree with this, but when he asked what he was thought, he said that his colleagues were right. So Sam's just started a new place of work. He's got people that he works with discussing asylum seekers. They're saying they think asylum seekers are treated too nicely, and that's not right. He doesn't agree with this view, but he's saying he does. Is that normative or informational? What's going on with Sam? Brilliant. Well done. Well done. Yeah, this one is clearly normative. He knows the information and he knows his own views on asylum seekers, yet still he's changing it because he's new and he wants someone to probably sit with at lunch in his new little group. So yeah, you've definitely got an example of normative. Okay, this is the third and the last example, and it's probably the one that's quite difficult to unpick. So Emma is a student. When she first went to university, she made friends with a group of students who were passionate about animal rights. At the time, Emma didn't have very strong opinions on animal research, but over the past few months, she has very much become against it. Now she's joined a campaign against animal research and has started to attend public demonstrations with her friends. So what do we think? Do we think Emma is informational or normative? Okay, let's see who's being brave and having a guess. Okay, we've got a vote for informational. Perfect. Another vote for informational. I wonder if we're being socially influenced by other people as we type. So this one here is a little bit of both. Okay, so it's a little bit of a trick question, as some of you might have guessed. Informational, absolutely, because it says she's found out more over time. So she didn't start protesting straight away. She's hung around with these people for a couple of months and now she's started doing it. So you could just say, actually, she's learned some stuff. She's grown her opinion over time. They've said some things she agrees with, and informational, now she knows more. She's getting involved. But we don't know. It could be that it's just that she wants to carry on with this group of friends. So the reason I've put that example is just so that we're aware it's not quite as simple sometimes as being one or the other. It looks really simple on the slide, doesn't it? Two separate situations. But sometimes it's a bit of a mix. Okay, people we like influence us, but then we want them to carry on liking us. So which it is probably a little bit more tricky. Okay, I'm just going to slip over that side. Okie dokie. Next bit of information. So we know that there's something called conformity. We know that there's something called normative social influence, and we know there's something called informational social influence, okay? So the next bit of information I'm going to share with you is that there is a person, a psychologist called Kelman, okay? So those of you that haven't done psychology before might not be used to this, but when we have psychologists, we always have their last name and then we have the date they did their research. So if it was me and I'd done some research yesterday, it would be Peskett 2021. So, as well as there being different explanations for conformity, there's also levels of conformity, okay? So some are really light and some are quite deep, okay? So compliance is kind of short-term conformity. Identification is mid-term conformity. And then lastly, internalization is kind of long-term deep conformity. So just listen for a moment while I talk us through these slides, and then I'm going to give you 10 minutes to have a task of trying to fill in the gaps, okay? So, compliance. The person conforms publicly but continues privately to disagree. So this is a really shallow level of conformity. So for example, you might laugh at a joke that you don't really think is that funny. Okay, that's really short term, not too much harm done, really quick. That's what that kind of shallowest level of compliance is. Identification, sorry, that's the compliance slide. So that's the first type, that's the shallowest type. So identification is the medium term type, okay? So this is when not only do you confirm publicly, you also do so whenever you're with the group, okay? So identification is when not only is it short term, it's more mid-term, okay? So a person might support a new football team every time they move to a new town. So it lasts more than a moment, like a laugh, but it would go on for a little bit of time. Okay, so mid-term, mid-length conformity. And then the last one is internalization, and this is long-term conformity. In fact, it often leads to a change in behavior. So a person conforms publicly and privately, so whether they're on their own or with the group, over a period of time, they've changed their views, and those views stick. Okay, so hopefully briefly that makes sense, this idea that we've got short term, mid-term and long term. What I would like you to have a go at, please, is filling in the gaps. Now, I don't want you to write the whole thing out, okay? But if you grab a scrap of paper, can I ask that for the next, I'm going to say 10 minutes, it might not take 10 minutes, but we'll see how we go. For the next 10 minutes, can you have a go at the fill in the gaps? So what I want you to do is to write the words in red at the bottom in the right order. Okay, so try and get them in the right place and in the right order. So I don't want you to write the whole text out. So for example, if you thought that first gap was right, you would put number 1 right, because that's the first fill in the gaps. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to do this. What I would like you to do when you have finished it is to put a thumbs up in the chat box so that I know you are done. Okay, so I need all of you, when you're done, to put a thumbs up in the chat box. So the 7 of us in here, okay, once you're done, put a thumbs up in the chat box, and once I've got 5 or 6 thumbs up, we'll go through some of the answers, and I might ask some of you to unmic, if you don't mind, to give me some of the answers. Okay, 10 minutes starts now. Thumbs up in the chat when you're done, my lovelies. Just going to turn my camera and microphone off while you're doing that. Okay, so take your time, no rush. If you are struggling, have a go, see which kind of might fit the best, if you like. And then when you do think you're done, just pop a thumbs up or a done in the chat box. Okay, well done, Zach. If we give it another 2-3 minutes, thumbs up in the chat box when we're done. Well done, Leah. Well done, Esther. Well done, Sasha. Okay, let's go through and see how we go. I appreciate some of you will be happy unmiking and some of you will not, and that's absolutely fine. So in the chat box or unmiked, what do we reckon? So we have got that first one being, sorry, my slides just moved, there we go. Compliance, this is when people what in public to the what of others. What do we think? We've got conform, well done. Yes, beautiful. Conform in public to the norms of others. Beautiful. Beautiful answers though. So that first one, I'll finish off. So compliance, this is when people conform in public to the norms of others, even though these norms contradict their privately held beliefs. For example, you may go along with the behavior of others and act in a similar manner despite disapproving of what they are doing. Okay, so that's that first one. So 1 is conform, 2 is norms, 3 is contradict, and 4 is disproving. So can we write the answers in to the first two in internalisation. So either in the chat or on mic, this is when people conform to the norms of others because they believe that these norms are what? This can result in a genuine what? What are the first two of internalisation? Perfect. Well done. Well done, all of you. Write and change. Perfect. So the sentence would be, this is when people conform to the norms of others because they believe that these norms are right. This can result in a genuine change to their private beliefs and attitudes as they internalise, is the next one, the norms of others and act according to them. Private acceptance is also known as conversion because the individual is converted to the beliefs of others. So internalisation is that really in-depth one. So you've got language such as convert, internalise, change. So that's the really in-depth one. Well done. So let's move to identification, the middle one, okay, and hopefully you haven't been caught out by them being in the wrong order. So identification, in the chat, what do we think of the first two words? This happens when the what takes on views of a particular group because they feel what? 1 and 2 from identification. What do we reckon, lovely people? Well done, Esther. Well done. First one in there. Well done, Leah. Well done, Layla. And well done, Zach, for before as well. Okay, so this last one, and I will put this up just so you can see how they fit. This happens when the individual takes on the views of a particular group because they feel connected to them in some way. Their views may change publicly or privately. The new attitudes may just be temporary. And if they leave the groups, their views may revert back. This distinguishes it from internalisation, where the person's values are altered and basically they change permanently. Okay, so this is that we might change for a bit, but if we left the group, we also might change back. Okay, brilliant. Okay, so couple of bits to go over. So, like I said, in psychology, we very much focus in on evaluating. So you can't take things at face value in psychology. There's not one agreement on how things work and why behaviour is the way it is. So I've just told you something about Kelman. I've told you Kelman, the psychologist, believes there are 3 levels of what we would say conformity. So compliance, identification, and internalisation. Now, you don't just accept that, okay? So in psychology, you would be expected to criticise Kelman. And some of the things you might criticise it for might be things like, it doesn't fit in the groups, okay? Maybe it's not as simple as it's short-term, medium, or long-term. Maybe it changes over time. Also, we're not always sure why we're conforming. Sometimes we just change our behaviour with a group, but we don't know why. So we can't say if it's because of the group or because we've changed our values, because we don't know why. It doesn't explain in Kelman's stages how long it takes to move from one stage to another, or if you can go straight to internalisation without having identification first. Also, Kelman doesn't explain what's meant by public and private. So he says, oh, your private views and your public views. So do you have to express them to be public views? Do you have to say them? And he also doesn't explain the individual differences, why people might conform. So what I'm trying to show you there by giving you some of those criticisms is that in psychology, we don't always just accept stuff. We have to criticize it. We have to interrogate the evidence. So just because Kelman has said there's these 3 levels doesn't mean there necessarily is, or doesn't mean you have to agree with them. And that's really important to know. So in the brief time that we've been talking, we have already looked at, wait there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 key terms. So in psychology, we have key terms, and this is the language we have to use to be successful in the exam. It's almost like the vocabulary of psychology. So in the chat box, can we write any of the 7 key terms that we think we've learned during this period of time? So what are the things I've been talking to you about that are key terms? Yep, got one already. Brilliant. Conform or conformity. Internalization, excellent. Perfect. So informational and normative social influence. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So we need 3 more. What might the other 3 be? What might the other 3 be? Compliance, brilliant. So we've got 2 left. 2 left. Identification, well done. Well done, Layla. What's the topic called? What's the whole idea that we've been looking for? The first thing we said. It is about conformity. I'm going to put you out your misery. The last one is social influence. Okay, the idea that we are influenced by factors outside of ourselves. So I'll just put those on the screen for you. So we said the topic is social influence. People can conform. It could be normative or informational. And then the levels are compliance, identification, and internalization. So well done. Well done. Okay, so I've got 2 things left to do and 5 minutes in which to do them, so I think we'll be okay. The first thing I want to do is talk to you about summer task, okay? So some of you in here will just be thinking, I might do psychology, I might not, but if you do pick to do psychology, we ask you to do a summer task, okay? Now I have got this shared on a different PowerPoint, so just give me 1 moment. Actually, I think it's further down this one, so excuse me flicking through. There we go, perfect. So 2 things to go through. The first is the summer task. So if you do psychology, we expect you before you arrive in September to have done a bit of research basically, and it will help you in your first lesson. Okay, now some of it you've already done, which will be good to know. So find out about the different types of conformity using the research of Kelman. So that's what we were just doing. So it might be that you just want to jot those 3 down, write a sentence about each. Obviously you can use Google to help you if you want to. Then we want you to find out a little bit about 2 people, Dusch and Gerard. So that's 2 people, and what is meant by their 2-process theory. So again, have a Google, get some information down. If you struggle to understand it, that's fine. We're just trying to get you to do a bit of reading before you arrive, so you've got a kind of quicker and better start. And then the last 2 are really famous bits of research, so you'll definitely be able to find information on these. So C is asking you to find out about Ash and Ash's research. And then the second one is asking you to find out about Zimbardo. So no one's going to, be annoyed if you haven't managed to do this before you arrive. But the whole idea is it needs to be done by kind of the end of the first week. So if you don't want like homework to arrive to when you join, this is something that you can get doing over that summer break and will mean that you can go quite quickly through the first lesson because you'll understand what's going on. So you don't have to email those or anything, you just bring them in with you in your first lesson, my lovelies. That's the idea behind these, okay? Yes, Esther, it's going to be put on the website. If you want to take a picture of it now as well to help you, that's fine. And also I've uploaded the PowerPoint into Teams. Do you have any recommendations for books about psychology? I absolutely do. It depends on your interest. Obviously, the textbook's really good for the academic stuff, but if you just want to read around the area, if you're really interested in criminal psychology, there's a book called Natural Born Killers, which is fabulous. Or if you're interested more in kind of gender psychology, then you might want to look at some of the work around women and whether women are different. And the kind of books you would be looking at there are things like The Fairer Sex, The Role of Women, things like that, those books there. And my last one, my personal real interest area in psychology is child psychology, So I like reading things like Piaget. So yeah, it depends what area you're interested in. Textbook is obviously good for the course, but there's loads out there, and it just depends on your interest. So yeah, I'd say Natural Born Killers, Role of Women, or Piaget, and you spell Piaget like I have put in the chat if you are interested. Great question. So you've got your summer task, and the first thing I wanted you to just be aware of, some of you in here might be trying to decide whether you're going to do psychology or sociology. So I've just put the slide up there. It might be that you're absolutely sure on which you want to do, but we tend to find students get a bit confused between the two. So obviously you can do both. If you really want to be a social scientist and you're really sure that that's the area you want to go into, then obviously you can do both. They're in separate option blocks. But psychology, we very much focus on the individual. There's more biology and there's more math. It is the science of how we behave. Sociology is more to do with society. So you look at systems rather than people. You might look at things like the education system. You might look at things like the role of the family and how they're helpful to society. So you've got the two there, and I just encourage you to make sure you're going in the right direction. So if you're interested in doing psychology because you did it at GCSE, you'll know which psychology is. But if you're not sure between the two, it's just that psychology is very much about the individual and the science of it, and sociology is more to do with structures and the legal system. But again, nothing stopping you doing both. We've got 3 minutes till the end of the session. I'm going to stick around. If there's any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself or to put them in the chat. But lovely to meet some new of you that haven't been here before. And thank you for all your participation today, particularly the 5 of you that have been put in the chat. Yes, Esther, you're absolutely right. Maybe you should do this job. Okay, so psychology is more like a science, biology, and sociology is more like the politics. Absolutely. Brilliant explanation. Okay, my lovelies, any questions, put them in the chat. But other than that, you're welcome to go. And I wish you a lovely summer. Thank you, lovelies. Thank you for the lesson too.